Ready? Chapter 47. Delivery 6. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Phew. I got... Chapter 46. Uddhava visits Vrindavan. Nanda Maharaj returned to Vrindavan without Krishna and Balaram. He was accompanied only by the cowherd boys and men. It was certainly a very pathetic scene for the gopis, Mother Yashoda, Srimati Radharani, and all the other residents of Vrindavan. Many devotees have tried to make adjustments to Krishna's being away from Vrindavan because, according to expert opinion, Krishna, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, never goes even a step out of Vrindavan. He always remains there. The explanation of expert devotees is that Krishna was actually not absent from Vrindavan. He came back with Nanda Maharaj as promised. When Krishna was starting for Mathura on the chariot driven by Akrura and the gopis were blocking the way, Krishna assured them that he was coming back just after finishing his business in Mathura. He told them not to be overwhelmed and in this way pacified them. But when he failed to come back with Nanda Maharaj, it appeared that he either cheated them or could not keep his promise. Expert devotees, however, have decided that Krishna was neither a cheater nor a breaker of promises. Krishna, in his original identity, returned with Nanda Maharaj and stayed with the gopis and Mother Yashoda in his bhava expansion. Krishna and Balaram remained in Mathura, not in their original forms, but in their expansions as Vasudev and Sankarsana. The real Krishna and Balaram were in Vrindavan, in their bhava manifestations, whereas in Mathura they appeared in the Prabhava and Vaibhava expansions. This is the expert opinion of advanced devotees of Krishna. Externally, however, they were absent from Vrindavan. Therefore, when Nanda Maharaj was preparing to return to Vrindavan, there was some discussion between him and the boys concerning how they could live in separation. The conclusion to separate was reached by mutual agreement. Vasudeva and Devaki, who happened to be the real parents of Krishna and Balaram, wanted to keep them now because of the death of Kamsa. While Kamsa was alive, Krishna and Balaram were kept under the protection of Nanda Maharaj in Vrindavan. Now, naturally, the father and mother of Krishna and Balaram wanted them to remain, specifically for the reformatory function of purification, the sacred thread ceremony. They also wanted to give them a proper education, for this is the duty of the father. Another consideration was that all the friends of Kamsa outside Mathura were planning to attack Mathura. For that reason, also, Krishna's presence was required. Krishna did not want Vrindavana disturbed by enemies like Dantavakra and Jarasandha. If Krishna were to go to Vrindavana, these enemies would not only attack Mathura, but would go on to Vrindavan, and the peaceful inhabitants of Vrindavan would be disturbed. Krishna therefore decided to remain in Mathura, and Nanda Maharaj went back to Vrindavan. Although the inhabitants of Vrindavan felt separation from Krishna, the resulting ecstasy, bhava, caused them to perceive that Krishna was always present with them by his leela or pastimes. Since Krishna had departed from Vrindavana and gone to Mathura, the inhabitants of Vrindavana, especially Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, Srimati Radharani, and the gopis and the cowherd boys, were simply thinking of Krishna at every step. They were thinking, here Krishna was playing in this way. Here Krishna was blowing his flute. Krishna was joking with us in this way. And Krishna was embracing us like this. This is called Leela Smarna, and it is the process of association with Krishna most recommended by great devotees. Even Lord Chaitanya, when he was at Puri, enjoyed Leela Smarana association with Krishna. Those in the most exalted position of devotional service and ecstasy can live with Krishna always by remembering his pastimes. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given us a transcendental literature entitled Krishna Bhavanamrita, which is full with Krishna's pastimes. Exalted devotees can remain absorbed in Krishna thought by reading such books. Any book of Krishna Leela, even this book, Krishna, or our teachings of Lord Chaitanya, is actually solace for devotees feeling separation from Krishna. That Krishna and Balaram did not return to Vrindavana can be adjusted as follows. They did not break their promise to return to Vrindavana, nor were they absent, but their presence was necessary in Mathura. In the meantime, Uddhava, a cousin brother of Krishna's, came to see Krishna from Dwaraka. He was the son of Vasudev's brother and was almost the same age as Krishna. His bodily features resembled Krishna's almost exactly. After Krishna returned from his teacher's home, he was pleased to see Uddhava, who happened to be his dearmost friend. Krishna wanted to send him to Vrindavana with a message to the residents to pacify their deep feelings of separation. As stated in the Bhagavad-Gita, Ye yatha mang prapadyante tangstateva bhajamyaham. Krishna is very responsive. He responds in proportion to the devotee's advancement in devotional service. Thus, as the gopis were thinking of Krishna in separation 24 hours a day, so Krishna was also always thinking of the gopis, Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, and the other residents of Vrindavan. Although he appeared to be away from them, he could understand how they were transcendently aggrieved, and so he immediately wanted to send Uddhava to give them a message of solace. Uddhava is described as the most exalted personality in the Vrishni dynasty, being almost equal to Krishna. He was a great friend of Krishna's, and being the direct student of Brihaspati, the teacher and priest of the heavenly planets, he was very intelligent and sharp in decision. Intellectually, he was highly qualified. Krishna, being his very loving friend, wanted to send Uddhava to Vrindavan just to study the highly elevated ecstatic devotional service practiced there. Even if one is highly elevated in material education and is even the disciple of Brihaspati, he still has to learn from the gopis and the other residents of Vrindavana how to love Krishna to the highest degree. It was Krishna's special favor to Uddhava to send him to Vrindavana with a message for the residents there, which was meant to pacify them. Lord Krishna is also named Hari, which means one who takes away all distress from the surrendered souls. Lord Chaitanya states that there cannot at any time be a worship as exalted as that realized by the gopis. Being very anxious about the gopis' grief, Krishna talked with Uddhava and politely requested him to go to Vrindavana. Shaking Uddhava's hand with his own hands, he said, "My dear gentle friend Uddhava, please go immediately to Vrindavana and try to pacify my father and mother, Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Devi, and the gopis. They are grief-stricken, as if suffering from great ailments. Go and give them a message. I hope their ailments will be partially relieved. The gopis are always absorbed in thoughts of me. They have dedicated body, desire, life and soul to me. I am anxious not only for the gopis, but for anyone who sacrifices society, friendship, love, and personal comforts for me. It is my duty to protect such exalted devotees. The gopis are the most dear. They always think of me in such a way that they remain overwhelmed and almost dead in anxiety due to separation from me. They are keeping alive simply by thinking that I am returning to them very soon." Requested by Lord Krishna, Uddhava immediately left on his chariot and carried the message to Gokula. He approached Vrindavana at sunset when the cows were returning home from the pasturing ground. Uddhava and his chariot were covered by the dust raised by the hooves of the cows. He saw bulls running after cows for mating. Other cows, with overladen milk bags, were running after their calves to feed them with milk. Uddhava saw that the entire land of Vrindavana was filled with white cows and their calves, running here and there all over Gokula, and he could hear the sound of milking. every residential house in Vrindavan was decorated for the worship of the sun god and the fire god, and for the reception of guests, cows, brahmanas, and demigods. Every home was sanctified by lights and incense. All over Vrindavan, there were nice gardens filled with flowers and the sounds of humming bees and singing birds. The lakes were filled with lotus flowers and with ducks and swans. Uddhava entered the house of Nanda Maharaj and was received as a representative of Vasudeva. Nanda Maharaj offered him a sitting place and sat down with him to ask about messages from Krishna, Balaram, and other family members in Mathura. He could understand that Uddhava was a very confidential friend of Krishna's and therefore must have come with good messages. "My dear Uddhava," he said, "how is my friend Vasudeva enjoying life? He is now released from the prison of Kamsa, and he is now with his friends and his children, Krishna and Balaram. So he must be very happy. Tell me about him and his welfare. We are also very happy that Kamsa, the most sinful demon, has been killed. He was always envious of the family of the Yadus, his relatives. Now, because of his sinful activities, he is dead and gone, along with all his brothers. Please let us know whether Krishna now remembers his father and mother and his friends and companions in Vrindavan. Does he like to remember his cows, his gopis, his Govardhan hill, his pasturing grounds in Vrindavan? Or has he now forgotten all these? Is there any possibility of his coming back to his friends and relatives so we can again see his beautiful face with its raised nose and lotus-like eyes? We remember how he saved us from the forest fire, how he saved us from the great snake Kaliya in the Yamuna, and how he saved us from many other demons, and we simply think of how much we are obliged to him for giving us protection in many dangerous situations. My dear Uddhava, when we think of Krishna's beautiful face and eyes and his different activities here in Vrindavan, we become so overwhelmed that all our activities cease. We simply think of Krishna, how he used to smile and how he looked upon us with grace. When we go to the banks of the Yamuna or the lakes of Vrindavan or near Govardhan Hill or the pasturing fields, we see that the impressions of Krishna's footprints are still on the surface of the earth. We remember him playing in those places because he was constantly visiting them. When his appearance within our minds became manifest, we immediately become absorbed in thought of him. We think, therefore, that Krishna and Balaram may be chief demigods in heaven who have appeared before us like ordinary boys to execute particular duties on earth. This was foretold by Garga Muni when making Krishna's horoscope. If Krishna were not a great personality, how could he have killed Kamsa, who possessed the strength of 10,000 elephants? Besides Kamsa, there were these very strong wrestlers, as well as the giant elephant Kuvalayapida. Krishna killed all these animals and demons just as a lion kills an ordinary animal. How wonderful it is that Krishna took in one hand the big heavy bow made of 3 joined palm trees and broke it very quickly. How wonderful it is that for 7 days continuously he held up Govardhan Hill with one hand. How wonderful it is that he has killed all the demons like Pralambasura, Dhenukasura, Aristasura, Trinavarta, and Bakasura. They were so strong that even the demigods in the heavenly planets were afraid of them. But Krishna killed them as easily as anything. While describing the uncommon activities of Krishna before Uddhava, Nanda Maharaj gradually became overwhelmed and could no longer speak. As for Mother Yashoda, she sat by the side of her husband and heard the pastimes of Krishna without speaking. She simply cried incessantly, and milk poured from her breasts. When Uddhava saw Maharaj Nanda and Yashoda so extraordinarily overwhelmed with thoughts of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and when he experienced their extraordinary affection for him, he also became overwhelmed and spoke as follows. My dear Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, you are most respectable among human beings because no one but you can meditate in such transcendental ecstasy. Uddhava continued, Balaram and Krishna are the original personalities of Godhead from whom the cosmic manifestation emanates. They are chief among all personalities. Each of them is both the material and the efficient cause of this material creation. Material nature is conducted by the Purusha incarnations, who all act under Krishna and Balaram. By their partial representation, they enter the hearts of all living entities. They are the source of all knowledge and all forgetfulness also. This is confirmed by Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita, 15th chapter. I am present in everyone's heart, and I cause one to remember and forget. I am the original compiler of the Vedanta, and I am the actual knower of the Vedas. Uddhava continued, If at the time of a death a person can fix his pure mind upon Krishna, even for a moment, after giving up his material body, he becomes eligible to appear in his original spiritual body, just as the sun rises with all illumination. Passing from his life in this way, he immediately enters into the spiritual kingdom Vaikuntha. This is the result of Krishna conscious practice. If we practice Krishna consciousness in this present body while in a healthy condition and in good mind, simply by chanting the holy Maha Mantra Hare Krishna, we will have we will have every possibility of fixing the mind upon Krishna at the time of death. If we do this, then our lives become successful without any doubt. But if we keep our minds always absorbed in fruitive activities for material enjoyment, then naturally, at the time of death, we shall think of such activities and again be forced to enter material conditioned bodies to suffer the threefold miseries of material existence. Therefore, to remain always absorbed in Krishna consciousness was the standard of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, as exhibited by Maharaj Nanda, Yashoda, and the gopis. If we can simply follow in their footsteps, even to a minute proportion, our lives will surely become successful, and we shall enter the spiritual kingdom, Vaikuntha. My dear Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, Uddhava continued, you have thus fixed your minds wholly and solely upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, whose transcendental form is the cause of impersonal Brahman. The Brahman effulgence is only the bodily rays of Narayana, and because you are always absorbed in ecstatic thought of Krishna and Balaram, what pious activities remains for you to be performed? What pious activity remains for you to perform? I have brought a message from Krishna that he will very soon come back to Vrindavan and satisfy you by his personal presence. Krishna promised that he would come back to Vrindavan after finishing his business in Mathura. This promise he will surely fulfill. I therefore request the two of you, who are the best among all who are fortunate, not to be aggrieved on account of Krishna's absence. You are already perceiving his presence 24 hours a day, yet he will come and see you very soon. Actually, he is present everywhere and in everyone's heart, just as fire is present in wood. Since Krishna is the Supersoul, he regards everyone equally. He sees no one as his enemy, no one as his friend, and no one as lower or higher than him. He actually has no father, mother, brother, or relative, nor does he require society, friendship, and love. He does not have a material body like us. He never appears or takes birth like an ordinary human being. He does not appear in higher or lower species of life like ordinary living entities who are forced to take birth on account of their previous fruitive activities. He appears by his internal potency just to give protection to his devotees. He is never influenced by the modes of material nature, but when he appears within this material world, he seems to act like an ordinary living entity under the spell of the modes of material nature. But in fact, he is the overseer of this material creation, and while remaining unaffected by the material modes of nature, he creates, maintains, and dissolves the whole cosmic manifestation. We wrongly look upon Krishna and Balaram as ordinary human beings, just as whirling men see the whole world whirling around them. The personality of Godhead is no one's son. He is actually everyone's father, mother, and supreme controller. There is no doubt of this. Whatever is already being experienced, whatever is not being experienced, whatever already exists, does not exist, or will exist in the future, whatever is the smallest and whatever is the biggest, have no existence outside the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything rests in him, but he is untouched by everything manifested. Nanda and Uddhava thus passed the whole night discussing Krishna. In the morning, the gopis prepared for morning arati by lighting their lamps and sprinkling butter mixed with yogurt. After finishing their Mangala Arati, they engaged themselves in churning butter from yogurt. While the gopis were thus engaged, the lamps reflected on their ornaments made the ornaments still brighter. Their churning rods, their arms, their earrings, their bangles, their breasts, everything moved, and the kumkuma powder gave their faces a saffron luster comparable to the rising sun. While making sounds by churning, they also sang the glories of Krishna. The two sound vibrations mixed together ascended to the sky and sanctified the whole atmosphere. After sunrise, the gopis came as usual to offer their respects to Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda. But when they saw the golden chariot of Uddhava at the door, they began to inquire amongst themselves, what was that chariot, and to whom did it belong? Some of them inquired whether Akrura, who had taken away Krishna, had returned. They were not very much pleased with Akrura because, being engaged in the service of Kamsa, he had taken lotus-eyed Krishna away to the city of Mathura. All the gopis conjectured that Akrura might have come again to fulfill another cruel plan. But they thought, we are now dead bodies without our Supreme Master Krishna. What further act can Akrura perpetrate against these dead bodies? While they were talking in this way, Uddhava finished his morning ablutions, prayers, and chanting, and came before them. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 46th chapter of Krishna. Uddhava visits Vrindavan.
Thank you. Om Jnana-timidantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Meditam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Mahyam Tadhati Shapadantikam Pandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapatakamanang Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lolita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vanchakolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Give some water. The Nanda Maharaj returned to Vrindavan without Krishna. This was pathetic, and it's described in some detail in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, how the residents of Vrindavan, Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mai, and the Brajbasis responded when Nanda Maharaj came back alone. So how is it that Krishna failed to come back is discussed. The one explanation is that Krishna never left Vrindavan. Vrindavanam partyaja padamekam nagacchati. He never takes one step outside Vrindavan. So he remained in Vrindavan in his bhava manifestation. Essentially, the Brajbasis were always thinking of Krishna. So Krishna was always present. Then Krishna had to satisfy Vasudeva and Devaki also, and therefore he had to stay back in Mathura for some time. And another consideration is that the friends of Kamsa, the other demons, were planning to attack Mathura. Dantavakra, and who else is mentioned? Jarasandha. So if they attacked Mathura, then Vrindavan would be next, and Vrindavan would be disturbed. So Krishna, therefore, thought to stay in Mathura. But although the inhabitants of Vrindavan felt separation from Krishna, the resulting ecstasy, bhava, caused them to perceive that Krishna was always present with them by his lila or pastimes. And then there's a description how the cowherd boys, the gopis, Srimati Radharani, were always thinking of Krishna. Krishna was playing here, Krishna was blowing his flute, joking with us this way, embracing us this way. This is Leela Smaran, remembering Krishna's transcendental activities. And Prabhupada said this is the process of association with Krishna most recommended by great devotees. In Puri, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was always remembering Krishna in this mood of separation, thinking of Krishna's pastimes, thinking of Krishna's qualities, thinking of Krishna's form, and therefore always overwhelmed by these thoughts. And those in the most exalted position of devotional service and ecstasy can live with Krishna always by remembering his pastimes. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has written a book, Krishna Bhavanamrita, full of Krishna's pastimes. Or there's this book, Krishna, or Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, or Srila Prabhupada's other books, which remind us always of Krishna's pastimes. This is yes. Okay. When Krishna returned from the ashram of Sandipani Muni, the Uddhava, his cousin brother, came from Dwarka to Mathura to see him. And he was the son of Vasudeva's brother. He was almost the same age. He resembled Krishna almost exactly in bodily features. And he was very dear to Krishna. So Krishna wanted to send him to Vrindavan to deliver a message to the gopis and the inhabitants of Vrindavan, just to pacify their deep feelings of separation. As the Brajbasis were always thinking of Krishna, Krishna was always thinking of them. And so he wanted to send a message to solace them. So Uddhava was exalted. He was most intelligent. Krishna used to rely on him for advice. He was the direct student of Brihaspati, the spiritual master of the demigods, and sharp, intelligent. So Krishna wanted to send Uddhava to Vrindavan, not because he was so highly qualified and was therefore the most fit to deliver the message, but more because Krishna wanted Uddhava to see the standard of Krishna consciousness, of love for Krishna, shown by the gopis. So it was a special favor to Uddhava. So Krishna said, I'm anxious not only for the gopis, but anyone who sacrifices society, friendship, love, personal comforts for me. It's my duty to protect such exalted devotees. So the gopis are staying alive just thinking that soon I'll return. So you please take this message. So Uddhava left at once for Gokul, and it's beautifully described that he arrived at sunset. The cows were covering his chariot with dust, and the whole Vrindavan was full of cows and calves, and every house was decorated for worship of the sun and reception of guests, sanctified by lights and incense. The beautiful scene of Vrindavan, with its gardens and flowers and birds and bees and lakes with lotus flowers and swans. All of these were greeted Uddhava. And Uddhava came to the house of Nanda Maharaj. And Nanda Maharaj was asking about Krishna. Does he remember us? Does he remember his pasturing grounds? Does he remember his friends and companions in Vrindavan? Does he still think of the cows? Is he coming back? Or has he forgotten us? Will we have the opportunity to again see his beautiful face? He saved us from Kaliya, from so many demons. And when we think of his beautiful face, his eyes, his activities here in Vrindavan, we become so overwhelmed that we become stunned. All our activities cease. And we simply think of Krishna, how he used to smile, how he used to look upon us with grace. When we go to Govardhan, when we go to the banks of the Jamuna, we still see his footprints, and we remember him playing in all these places. We think Krishna and Balaram must be great demigods. Gargamuni said something like that. How wonderful it is that he killed so many demons, that he lifted Govardhan Hill, that he and gradually he became overwhelmed and couldn't speak anymore. I can't help but be reminded, because On next month is the disappearance of His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj, who was in Mayapur describing the activities of Krishna, the activities of Lord Chaitanya. And while describing these activities, he became overwhelmed and said, "I can't speak more." And shortly after, just within the hour, he left his body, left this world. So a devotee is always absorbed in thinking of Krishna, always absorbed in Krishna's pastimes, qualities, form, everything related to Krishna. And therefore, in separation, feeling the presence of Krishna more intensely. So Uddhava gives his message, you're the most fortunate among living beings that you're able to meditate on Krishna in this way, in ecstasy. Krishna and Balaram are the source of the whole cosmic manifestation. They're the material and efficient causes of material creation. The Purusha incarnations act under the Krishna and Balaram. As plenary portions, they enter the heart of every living entity. They bring about remembrance and forgetfulness. In this way, they gave he gave this philosophical message. In the midst of this, Srila Prabhupada, because Uddhava says, if at the time of death the person can fix his pure mind upon Krishna, even for a moment, after giving up his material body, he becomes eligible to appear in his original spiritual body and enters the spiritual world. So Srila Prabhupada talks about how one achieves this by chanting the Maha Mantra and in this way thinking of Krishna. So if one can simply follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Nanda, Yashoda, and the gopis, even to a minute proportion, Srila Prabhupada says, our lives will be successful and will enter the spiritual kingdom. So in this way, Uddhava continues to glorify Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda and describe to them the Supreme Personality of Godhead and congratulate them, as it were, for thinking of him always. And he assures them that soon he'll come back, Krishna will come back, and tells them that he's brought a message from Krishna. In the midst of his discussion, Krishna and Balaram aren't ordinary human beings. As whirling men see the whole world whirling around them, we see Krishna and Balaram as ordinary human beings. But they're the source of everything. So Nanda and Yashoda Mai couldn't say anything. She was just silent and crying. And Nanda and Uddhava spent the whole night talking about Krishna. And in the morning, the gopis came. Elsewhere it's said that they used to come every morning to offer their respects to the most exalted persons in Vrindavan, Nanda Yashoda. And so they came with, described after finishing their Mangalarti, they would churn butter And then while they were engaged in this way, the lamps reflected on their ornaments, made the ornaments still brighter. And after sunrise, they came, but they saw this chariot at the door. They thought maybe Akrura has come back. Cruel Akrura. But what more can he do to us? We're already dead bodies. So they were thinking in this way, what is this chariot about? And meanwhile, Uddhava finished his morning duties and came before them. And the chapter ends there. Yes, Akurnath Prabhu.
We hear that the Brajbasis have spontaneous bhakti or, raga bhakti, devotional service. What exactly does that mean, and how is that different from other devotional service?
How is the devotional service of the Brajbasis in raga, ragatmika bhakti, how is it different from other devotional service? Their devotional service is completely spontaneous and completely, it absorbs their whole existence. They have no other business than to serve Krishna. We serve Krishna as a matter of duty. Our intelligence tells us that there's Krishna and Maya. We're better off taking shelter of Krishna, or Maya will get us. Or we find there's some advantage to being in the association of devotees. Maybe we get some bliss, some happiness. And we're practicing we have some attraction also. We think the deities are very beautiful, the books are very nice. And so we're trying to follow and purify our hearts and develop our natural attraction for Krishna. But the associates like Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda Mai, the gopis, they're perfectly, their eternal life is to be engaged in Krishna's service. And so much so that the other devotees are followers of these devotees. They're the most exalted. They're even among liberated, there's so many liberated devotees in the spiritual world, but they follow the standard of Nanda Yashoda, of the gopis, of Krishna's most intimate associates. So, in any case, this spontaneous and devotional service of the highest intensity is the natural life of the Brajbasis. And we're just aspiring, as Prabhupada said, to follow it in their footsteps and hope to attain a fraction of that bhakti. The Sahajas want to assume the position of Nanda Maharaj, of the gopis, of Yashoda Mai, as if it were such a cheap thing that it could be attained just by some sort of practice or imagination or emotion, sentiment. But the teachings of Lord Chaitanya is that one has to follow in their footsteps. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, you mentioned that anybody who sacrifices time for Krishna, Krishna protects.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yes.
Anyone who sacrifices. So sometimes when we are doing our services, for example, like when we're out in book distribution, we're sacrificing our time for Krishna, but at the same time, we are a little bit fearful that, okay, someone might come and stab us, or someone might do this to us because we're on the street and we don't know what might happen. So why do we feel like that? Because at the same time we are practicing Krishna consciousness, and at the same time we're also fearing that something might happen. So should we practice our service in a safe zone, or is it okay to just take that risk and just go out there and whatever happens, happens?
Sometimes we feel fear when we're out there on book distribution or engaged in service. Is it okay just to be out there and let it all be in Krishna's hands, or should we be in a safe zone? From one point of view, from an absolute point of view, we just surrender everything to Krishna and then whatever comes. Rakshasyati vishvasho. Krishna will protect me. That's finally we'll meet the greatest danger. Death will come. So to whom will we, what safe zone is there? There is no safe zone. You trip over an electrical cord in your home and break your neck. You know you can't be said. There's no safety anywhere. So the only safety, Prabhupada said that the safest place in the material world is in the kirtan. Whether it's the yes, see to your phone, please. Whether it's the chanting party or the book distribution. From another point of view, in our practical affairs, there's something to be said for not exactly being just in a cozy little safe zone, but at least in a prudent zone. In a prudent zone. There are places that we may not go. There are times we may not go to certain places. Those who are serving in South Africa, they certainly know these things, that there are places that you're just taking your life into your hands for no good reason by going to these places at these times. And then after they've killed you, you're useless for book distribution. So one may employ some prudence, that I'm not on the platform of absolute dependence, and I'm not on such a platform where Krishna is always going to be thinking of making sure I'm perfectly all right. Let me be prudent also, not just sentimentally, oh, everything's in Krishna's hands. I'll drive on the right side of the road, I'll drive on the left side of the road, I'll drive at any speed, I'll do anything, and Krishna will protect me. Why put Krishna through the difficulty of having to protect you, or why invite needless disaster? But we take some risk. We don't want to just be cozy, sit at home with our, what do they call us? In our comfortable slippers, sitting by the side of the fire and reading Krishna book and sent out for a prasadam pizza and live very comfortably. We're meant to undergo some trouble, take some risk. Yes, take some trouble and take some risk for Krishna. And Krishna, we read that, Krishna reciprocates, Krishna appreciates that. So not just a comfort zone, but also not a a zone of total disregard. Is that okay? Yes.
Hare Krishna. So we hear this about Uddhava, that he was a student of Brihaspati. And I guess today, if someone would say that, like, yeah, my son is, he's taking lesson from Brihaspati, no one would accept that today. But back in those times, people accepted that. So I'm trying to understand, was it because there was more like traffic between the
Yeah,
heavenly,
there was more traffic
between the heavenly realms and the earthly realm or something, and he was going there, or Brihaspati was coming down, or they were meeting somewhere in between? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Any comments?
Yeah, it is mentioned 5,000 years ago, the demigods showed up for the sacrifice, Rajasuya sacrifice of Maharaj Yudhisthira. They used to come. Now there's no use coming because there's nothing happening here, no sacrifices, no pious people. It's a place, not one of those places you don't come to. But back then, yes, there was contact. That's, I guess, the best suggestion we can make. Thank you. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm thinking about how Krishna is always in Vrindavan, but he's also acknowledging that he's currently in the Krishna book, not in Vrindavan. And so I'm trying to understand, why would he promise? Because it's one thing not to come, but why would he constantly send a promise, I'm coming, I'm coming? It feels like the absolute truth is lying.
It seems like the absolute truth is lying. Well, one thing is that he did come, or he never left. That's one explanation given. There's also, do we have Bhagavad-Gita in some sort of form here that is accessible? I don't think so. The Bhagavad-Gita speaks about these things in a wonderful fashion. How, what the reasons were that Krishna thought of going to Vrindavan, but then didn't go to Vrindavan. And I could, give some sort of paraphrase, but it's not nearly as good as what's there in the book. If you have a copy, then by all means, you have it online. But then, can you find that particular? You don't have it searchable. Unless you know where that portion is, where he's speaking about that. It's hard to find it. Yeah. Maybe we should look. You can spend a little time in the evening, find that portion. It's wonderful how Krishna considers going back, but then there are reasons why he doesn't, more than what we're reading here. Excuse me? Oh, but then still it'll take us, we'll be sitting here, looking through the pages. We'll just put it off a day. But there was something I was thinking. It's toward the end of part one, right? Yeah. Well, no, there's not much time, so we'll leave it till tomorrow. Was there something I wanted to say about that? Yeah, well, Krishna, one thing is just to keep them alive, because they're living in the hope that Krishna will come back. if he says, I'm not coming back, that's the end of their lives, essentially. And they'll say, what is there to live for? What is there to live for? Krishna's not coming back. Our lives are over. So Krishna keeps them alive with this promise. Another consideration is, by this promise, he's bringing the Brajbasis closer and closer to him. They're always deeply immersed in Krishna consciousness. And by this promise, they become even more deeply immersed in Krishna consciousness. So he's stimulating their love to higher and higher levels, higher and higher peaks. That's another purpose. Uddhava sees that. Uddhava loves Krishna also, but when he sees the mood of the gopis, he's astonished and overwhelmed. There's more. Let's see. You'll remember. We'll look and maybe read from that portion if we're able tomorrow. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm wondering about the relationship between Uddhava and Krishna, and how did it develop to such a strong relationship that they're so close when this is really the first we hear about him. I mean, we don't hear of them visiting as children, or we don't, hear of any interaction like that beforehand. I was wondering whether it was based on Uddhava hearing so much about Krishna and developing such a deep love, or...
Well, it's mentioned here they were cousins. That much is described. I don't know if sort of a backstory. Maybe there may be in some of the Goswami literature or something, some backstory, but I'm not familiar with it. They look almost identical, and of course later we hear about how Krishna is depending on Uddhava for his counsel and so on. Is it in the third canto? Yes, you could speak to that.
Yeah, I was just saying. In the third canto, I described when he was a child. In the third canto, it described as a child he was so absorbed in love for Krishna and playing with Krishna, like Krishna dolls or whatever, that he would forget to eat. His mother couldn't. So he was like.
He was playing with dolls of Krishna, and he'd be so absorbed that he'd forget to take his meals. He'd just be engaged in that way. That we find in third canto. Yeah, thank you. Something else?
I have two. I was wondering if you could elaborate on these different manifestations of bhav, vaibhav, prabhav.
Vaibhav and prabhav are not like bhavas in the sense of emotions. They're particular types of expansions of Krishna. That's as far as, prabhav. And it gets quite complicated when you read teachings of Lord Chaitanya. You find that prabhava vilas and prabhava vikas, and so many different manifestations, but essentially they're expansions of Krishna.
And also you mentioned Gaur Govinda Maharaj. I was wondering if you had known him, and if so, if you would like to share a little bit about that.
Well, I knew him to some extent. I never really got the opportunity to serve with him at length, but we would sometimes meet. He was traveling in America. I would sometimes meet him there. He would travel to South Africa. I would sometimes meet him there. We traveled in Orissa on Padayatra, and we'd have his company there. he would meet with the Padayatra was going from village to village in Orissa for some time. This is like before Gaur Purnima in 1986. And he would come out and meet us, join with us. Our program was we would walk and chant during the day, and in the evening we would have our meal and have a big program for the village, kirtan and film and so on. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj would speak in Odia. Otherwise, we would have to have translators. And in any case, he was the leader for Odisha, so he would speak very strongly. And I couldn't follow it, of course, but his style of preaching, he was very strong, and you could hear that huh? You don't want to surrender? Nonsense!
There, a few years ago, I read his disciple Madhavananda gave me a biography, which is quite remarkable, and I can recommend that. He's had a very interesting life, and one of his disciples has been, approaching me and saying, "You have to get this book, the biography." And I said, "I already read it." And he said, "No, this is a new one or a different one or something like that." But you can find his disciples are selling his books. There's a lot of books, and I recommend his biography because it's quite a remarkable life.
He was a school teacher. He was married at a young age, as typically young men are here in India. But at a certain point, while still a young man, he just left in the middle of the night.
He gave his children to his brother to raise.
And became a sadhu. And he was looking, where can I find a pramanic guru? Where can I find a bona fide guru? And he was looking and looking, but he found all, nonsense rascals, or he didn't find anyone suitable. And then he came to Vrindavan, and he saw, I think, a poster that Prabhupada was here. And he met Prabhupada, and then he translated Prabhupada's books into Odia language. He used to have a quota, so many pages per day. And until he finished his quota, he wouldn't take prasad. First quota, then he'd take prasad. So translating Prabhupada's books. And he established our temple in Bhubaneswar, the capital of Odisha. It was kind of the way, as Juhu was like a remote place way out of Bombay, so our temple location was also a remote place on the outskirts of Bhubaneswar with snakes and scorpions and the usual cast of pests and threats. But he camped out there, made a little hut, and began the activities and construction. Other devotees helped. Tejas Prabhu, Bhagavad, and now Bhagavad Maharaj, very much involved. And now that we have a very solid presence there, a beautiful temple in Bhubaneswar. And he traveled quite extensively. His mission, he said, was to preach to the preachers. To preach to the preachers. Preachers also need nourishment, upliftment, instruction. So he was preaching to the preachers. And he would speak to this, among other things, to this point that we have to learn to cry for Krishna. Prabhupada also talks about that. And so he said that he was opening a crying school. How to cry for Krishna. There's a lot more that can be said. His disappearance anniversary is on the 11th. There'll be a program at the Bhakti-Vedanta ashram in Govardhan for those who may wish to attend. There's a multi-day program, but his actual disappearance day is the 11th, which is also the disappearance day of disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Appearance day of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And unless we're going to go much more over time, but quite an extraordinary devotee. He was a member of ISKCON's governing body commission, although his nature was not to be an administrator, a manager, but he was appointed to the GBC. And I would see, because I would sometimes be in the meeting room, that he was listening very intently, very seriously to the affairs being discussed. And he wouldn't speak much. A lot of people spoke about this and about that and this point and that point and arguing over this or pointing out that or raising a question about this. But he would speak, it would be very conclusive. He would speak to very essential points of Srila Prabhupada's teachings and Prabhupada's instructions. Not just a sort of a technical point or this would be an advantage or that would be a disadvantage. Not so much political analysis, but on the point of tattva, what is it that Prabhupada is teaching? What is it that Prabhupada told us to do? What is Prabhupada's mission? Really to the, and when he would speak, everybody, would listen because it was powerful. And his disciple Madhavananda, mentioned by Kurinath Prabhu, publishes a bi-monthly, that is to say twice a month, magazine, Krishna Katamrita Bindu, which is available online. You just subscribe to it. And it comes to your mailbox. Just full of different Krishna Katha. It comes every Ekadashi. And there's always some short article, usually by Gaur Govinda Maharaj, as well as other articles. Okay, we'll stop here. Thank you very much. When good fortune arises, when good fortune arises. And his kirtan was very powerful. He belonged to a family, actually, of devotees who were well known for their kirtan, Vaishnava kirtan. Not an ordinary person. And who wanted to, okay. Who's in the back there? You wanted to lead yesterday, and who was going to lead yesterday? No, we didn't cut you off. All right, who wants to lead today? Take some prasadam before you go. Don't leave home without it. And let me pass this on. Do we know who's leading kirtan? You're leading kirtan.
Who?
You can play. Here, okay. Okay. What happened? Okay. Hare Krishna. Jayadvita Maharaj ki jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, नाम संकीर्तन की जय।
Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadip Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande.